This episode is powered by Poddex.
Let's talk about the meat of the non-gaming topic, space. Dun dun dun. I thought you were gonna say something.
Yeah, no, I just like the awkward silence and staring at you sometimes. But
It's not awkward when you stare at me.
oh yeah. No, yeah, this just an interesting topic, especially as like we educate ourselves more on it, and even the government kind of gets on stuff saying like, oh, we found this, we found that. And for anybody who follows the story of NASA, they basically find new asteroids and new planets basically damn near every day now. So
You see the article about Mars, the rover that just
yeah, they just landed there.
Perseverance, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a talking point in of itself right there, with how Elon Musk and SpaceX is kind of making a push to try to get people to colonize Mars within the next couple of decades here. So
well, he's also I think his main first mission is commercialized coughing, commercialized flights to the moon. I think was his first intention, and then branching off from there, he wants to see where he can go with it. They had their first successful launch. What was that, like last year, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was last year. It was like almost 6 months ago or something. I think it was like last summer they did it.
Yeah. So no, that's definitely interesting, and yeah, no, space is crazy, and it's like the more you understand about space, it almost like feels terrifying how hard it is for like our planet to exist. Is like, you think about how hard it is just to be born as a person. Now multiply that, the difficulty of that. It's like it almost feels like our planet, our setting to be here right now is almost just such an amazing feat in itself, because it's like, holy crap, you look at how one little minor detail could have changed the fact that we're even alive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, even with like kind of like how you say with like our planet in of itself, if we were X amount of miles closer to the sun or further away from the sun, our planet wouldn't be livable. So it's just
Yeah.
like little stuff like that. And it like you said, kind of the more you learn about space, space is one of those topics where the more you educate yourself, the more you learn about it, the more terrifying it becomes. Like usually most topics you learn about something, you get more excited to learn more. Obviously same thing with space, is you learn more, you get excited to learn about specifically like stars or black holes or just within the planets of our solar system. So there's different topics that fall within the idea of space, and as you explore each of them individually, it, like you said, it becomes more terrifying.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then like, I don't know, because like for me, my biggest fear is always constantly the unknown, but it's almost like the reverse of like, say, space, the ocean, even what's directly underneath our feet to the center of the earth. The unknowns is what genuinely is terrifying to me, because it's, and like, but with space, the more you start to know, it doesn't really lose its sense of terrifying. It's just like now you're starting to understand what's at play, and sort of like, it's crazy just how far we are able to look out into the universe now, like how much that has expanded over at least even the last 20 years, how
Mm-hmm.
much more we have been able to view outside of our solar system and have a better understanding of what's going on in the universe. And I don't know, it's just such a confusing concept to me when it comes to space, though, because it's like, why our planet? And like, I guess that's more of a philosophical question of why do we exist? Like, what was it just circumstance? Like, was that just like, did we just get lucky? Like, to be able to like, it's so weird, like, because like we've all had those fleeting moments where we think about life and how like it sucks and stuff like that, but it's like to depreciate the value of life in itself is kind of a ridiculous concept. And I'm saying I even do it myself, so it's not like I'm saying people are less than for doing it, but to understand how complex it is for our existence, our intelligence, our ability. Like when you think about the idea that like you're sitting in an apartment right now or a house, whatever it is, who's ever tuning in, like the things you have, the things you're capable of doing are truly amazing. Just being alive is amazing. When you look at like planets like even Mars, where it's like that easily could have been us, and there could have been none of this. So even where life feels so fleeting and short, and it's like sometimes you're trying to define the reason of why, thinking about how crazy it is you're here in the first place, maybe stop asking that question for yourself and just enjoy it while you're here.
Hmm. And kind of one thing, like, and I'll briefly talk about it because I know we try not to dive too much into like politics or religion or anything like that. But like, I mean, there's always the constant battle of religion versus science, and as far as the religion is based off of faith and science is based off of proving why things happen and why, for example, we exist. And I feel like starting to get to the point now that religion is getting more scared of science, not because it's intimidating them, but because they know that the more science looks into things, like looking into the depths of space, finding other like there's been a handful of planets that like NASA and stuff has found that are have similar atmospheres and are composed the same way as Earth. So how can one say not make an invalid argument that there's some form of living thing on a different planet? Because religion and like just diving into the Bible has taught us that we're the only humans that exist, like we're the only thing on on Earth. um
So I would respectfully, I got an argument to that about the concept of like, because this is actually one of the classes I'm in right now, and one of the books we just read, it's actually really interesting. It's written by James Gould, and he talks about the concept of noma. So it's not so much just an argument, but it's more of a better approach that I think actually should be more adapted. Even if you're not religious, that should be kind of the stance that we take on it. It's called noma. It's non-overlapping magisterium. What it essentially means is that religion and science do two fundamentally different things for humanity, and they can respectfully both exist without having the need to, like, you shouldn't cross lines between the two. Like, because like religion does provide, like, because like when you ask yourself the philosophical question of like what are values, where do they come from, morality, things like this, like humans are born, I truly believe, with an innate morality, and there's like even been experiments done to almost validate that, like within youth and in infantiles. And I'll have to find the experiment I was reading up on about that, but and if anyone ever wants to know more information about that, I'll provide it. But when it comes to defining those values, I do feel like religion, even if you lived a life without religion, it still paved the way for helping define those things until law came into place that tells you what you can and can't do. Because like even if you look at how the country was founded, it, obviously those policies exist kind of based around the core foundation of religion. And so it's sort of like religion has played a core part in society, and I don't think you need to be religious. You don't even have to be spiritual to understand the role it can play. And does that mean, and it's on both ends of this, science people should not be bigots to religious people, but religious people shouldn't be bigots to science. And like this is one of the questions I challenged my professor with. I was like, well, the problem is you'll meet a lot of religious people who deflect questions. They don't actually want to provide their answers. They want to say, well, God's will, God's way, sort of concept, versus like, well, actually, if you look, because like the biggest thing about religion, and if we're going to define it by any certain religion, I'm pretty sure the one most people talk about is Christianity, but you could even like branch out into other religions if you wanted to, Buddhism, stuff like that. And you look at what the core idea of it is, it's to channel faith. And a lot of people get it twisted. Just like you have a lot of bad people in the science community, you get a lot of bad people in the religious community too. It's like you got a lot of you get bad people. I won't say a lot, but you get bad people in every sort of formalized organization, be it religion, science, be it law enforcement, be it education system, be it whatever. You get bad apples no matter what. Just because of their personal experiences. I don't know, but they choose to twist the perspective. And like I see this, like, and not to get political about it or even on a religious argument, I see people who sit there and they get so angry, and I see it on social media, and I know some of these people aren't the most educated people, not to insult them, but some of them don't actually keep their perspective open, and they just sit there and they are people who are burned because they were badmouthed by religious people or someone on the other side of the fence, and so now they've justified what they're doing, but what they're doing is they're just returning fire from the other side of the fence now. It's like if you want that kind of stuff to stop, you got to stop throwing shit across the fence. You got to
Mm-hmm.
learn to accept that the fence is there and find a common ground on it. Yes, there's going to be arguments that are battled over like the key core concepts of like abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, that stuff. And then there's going to be other arguments. But fundamentally, if someone wants to live their life, this is the way I put it. If I see someone who wants to live their life, Christian, conservative, I have no hate for them. If I see one of my friends who's LGBTQ, atheist, I have no hate for them either. I love and respect them both the same. They have their values, and trying to find a middle ground on that is the best thing we can work towards, because I don't think anyone should have to sacrifice who they are for the sake of the other side. And that's all I really got to say on that point. So that's when it comes to religion and science. Even as science progresses, religion and science, there's a lot of notable scientists who are religious. And just because they can it's almost like just because you can try to disprove God doesn't mean you can prove that he doesn't exist. Just
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's almost like one of those things. It's like because they're if you leave the Bible up to interpretation, if or the Quran or whatever religious text you're reading, if you leave it up to interpretation, if you don't take the word so literally, but you take the good messages that come from it, there's a lot of good value in it. And like even if you look at like as silly a concept as it is, you've seen the movie the Book of Elijah, right?
The Book of Eli
Or Book of Eli, thank you.
with Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the concept of that movie is literally that the Bible could be used either as a way of salvation or as a weapon, because it does give people hope and it gives people faith. If you have something that gives people hope and they're not using it now, like the people who are using it the wrong way, yeah, by all means, check them. If you know what they're learning on their side of the fence, but you just choose to believe what you believe, you can check them every step of the way, because you can even quote their book and make them look stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to use anything attacking towards them. You could simply be like, hey, like, well, if you read Corinthians so and so, it says this. And what you're doing is in direct violation of that. Even in the loosest interpretation, you're directly violating that. Or it's on the other side of that, you see someone in the scientific department say evolution. The Catholic Church recognizes evolution as real. If you actually look at the Catholic, like if you look, the Pope has stated that evolution is indeed real. The only concept that they argue differently is that the concept of the soul. The soul can't evolve. That's all they say. They say that it's very possible that we did evolve. But what they explain is that the soul in itself is not something that can evolve or change or be altered by its evolutionary trait, this ability to adapt and change and all that. And that's what sets us apart, is the soul. And there's different interpretations of the soul. That's the beauty in it. There's so many different interpretations. And whatever anyone chooses to believe in, be it on one side of the token or the other, if you're using it to lead what you believe a morally right life, and it's so hard to define like what is morals, because like philosophy is the fun middle ground there, because it's always like, well, what is it? It's just a lot of
Yeah.
questions. It's just like, well, what is it? And then it's always pissing people off, but it does get them thinking. And because that was another funny thing to, even if like I'm sure like this is one topic we got on was about Socrates. The way he died was interesting, because he just asked a lot of questions, and he got killed like because he got offered the chance to kill himself in his 80s or something like that, because he pissed off people, and they said, well, since you're a known person, you get the option to end your own life if you want to, and he did. But it it all comes down to, it's like there's going to be discomfort, but a lot of people don't want to accept that discomfort in society. And what I see right now is I see like a mass push to one side of things. But what people don't understand is if you flip the world over and you do exactly to the people what you think they did to you or your people throughout the years, you're just repeating history. And
Mhm.
that's why I believe history is important. Don't forget the sins or the awfulness that has happened in life. Don't forget the evil atrocities that have come out of the past, but don't repeat them.
Yeah.
Don't discourage somebody because they're different than you. Just because now they're being a bigot towards you, yeah, shut them down. But if someone's just existing, like, what is the point?
Yeah.
You yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and I feel like too, just to kind of touch again on different interpretations. I feel like a lot of people kind of like have a knack on like as far as like the Bible and how it has like there's hundreds if not thousands of different interpretations, whether it's different versions or just in different languages. And I feel like as more versions of it come out, people who are true to their faith kind of they don't like seeing more versions of it because there's pieces of it getting lost along the way. But I look at it as it's the exact opposite. If there's only a handful of versions that exist of one book, how do you expect billions of people who come from different mindsets, cultures, backgrounds, and speak different languages to all read and gain a general understanding? And that's the thing too, is not, and that's why there's different versions and different interpretations of it, because people are drawn to a version of it that they see fits their values. And that
Yeah.
and that and that's a good thing, but also that's where people butt heads is, oh, your Bible says this, or my Bible says this. Both are essentially the same, but because a couple of words are different, that's where people butt heads. And then, and kind of getting back into the main topic of space, that's where people too, because the Bible is such a vast book of different interpretations. So is space. It's a vast, essentially endless thing that people can interpret differently. Where space to some people is the earth and our atmosphere and the moon. To some people space is our solar system. To some people space is um like beyond that, it's the Milky Way, it's our galaxy. So and that's why
I'm
too.
listening. I'm just looking up something because
No, you're good.
it actually pertains to this.
And that's why I was just like using that, like the religion as like kind of a tangent into space. It's because of how vast it is and how many unknowns there are and how many questions that need to be answered. Is there's different ways that people can understand it. And the funny thing is both people can be right, but neither of them wants to admit that they're wrong. That's the problem.
So
um
here's an interesting concept. So it's like, so I just Googled this because I was curious. I was like, I looked up, does the universe have an edge? It says, and although our observable universe has an edge, the universe as a whole is infinite and has no edge. Many galaxies are so far away from the Earth that the expansion of the universe causes them to recede from the Earth at a speed faster than light. And that's such a crazy concept with how fast the universe is expanding. It's almost like we're getting further and further away from who knows what. And it's like, what, it, there's just no feasible way for me to believe that we are the only planet that sustains life forms, and there's no way for me to believe that we are truly the most intelligent thing in the universe at all, because it already shows the way animals are evolved. Like, animals have peaked in their evolution to the point of, like, dolphins are highly intelligent creatures, and they are they don't they aren't like us, but they do have a lot of very similar characteristics. It's to think that, like, okay, if this planet in itself can spawn at least a couple dozen pretty fairly intelligent life forms, and especially as something as advanced as us, it only makes me wonder, like, what is going on. And, like, then you get into the concept of multiverse concept of the idea that, like, there's actually multiple universes overlapping, or the idea of that anything that can be is happening, it's just happening, and it's this segued universe. And it's so crazy. Like there's so many different theories that are like being proposed constantly and looked into. And then I don't know. The idea of like people fucking around with like black hole concepts always bothers me though, because it's like, man, I could just see us like destroying ourselves with our intelligence. You know what I mean? I could see us ripping our own planet apart by pushing something too far to a point.
Yeah.
I could see us ending our world quicker than I could see an outside source doing it.
Oh, 100%. If it that's why too, like the fact, like even at a military stance, how many nukes that exist in the world? Like like why it blows my mind how many like nukes or just um like missiles exist in the world, because if all of them were used at the same time, only like probably 1 or 2% of them would actually be doing damage. The rest of them would just be useless. You know what I mean? So like it that kind of going off the point that you said, I don't believe an outside source would ever destroy us unless it was like an asteroid or something that would throw us off course and change our climates, and we'd slowly die off into either burning to death or freezing to death or whatever it might look like. Um, but yeah, I truly believe, kind of like what you said, that if our planet were to ever fall into a decay where the human race would completely get extinct, it would 100% be from us. And like you said, it would be from us pushing the idea of science too far, whether, like you said, black holes, or as I was talking about with nuclear energy and stuff like that. Um,
Well, I feel like we've got actually a lot better handle on nuclear fission and stuff like that than like a lot of people realize. I don't see that so much as actually a threat, as something more of like a controversy in terms of like people are scared of it, but it's actually a very positive source of energy with potentially very bad outcomes. But there's a lot of things throughout history that we've done that have a lot of bad outcomes. But if the good can outweigh the potential negative and we can refine it, I don't see it as so much of an issue as long as we are 100% sure about what we're doing. Because nuclear energy provides about 20% of the energy to the planet, I'm pretty sure right now. So, and interesting fact for you though, there was two bombs that fell in North Carolina. It was either North or South Carolina. I was trying to find the information on it, but it was like two atomic bombs that I think were actually dropped during World War II or during the Cold War. A plane was flying over and something happened. And they just fell, but neither went off.
oh fuck.
Yeah, so go ahead. Like, I definitely recommend reading up on that sometime. It's interesting, but yeah, no, they never activated. I think one is still buried out there somewhere. I don't think that like because they
That's
just couldn't remove it.
that's crazy. It kind of, and one thing I want to touch on too, and kind of a point that you said before about um, us probably not being the most intelligent beings that exist, and I 100% agree with that. Especially like you said with multiverses, I truly believe that there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of other planets out there that have life that are either similar, if not more advanced than us. So for us to say that we're the most intelligent beings that exist, I highly doubt that. There's if there's a possibility that thousands of other beings exist that are similar to us, what are the chances that we're the smartest out of all of those hundreds of thousands of beings? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and so there's even like we've talked about this concept before, but like the whole idea of being in a simulated reality. And like I watched a video breakdown by Neil deGrasse Tyson that actually like kind of narrowed the margin down to like 50-50 chance that we're living in a simulated reality and 50-50 chance that this is the base reality. And he's like, and I can live with that. I'd rather deal with a 50-50 chance instead of what he was believing before, that there's like 1,000 to 1 that this was a simulated reality.
Yeah.
But even like if you think about the percentage of that, 50-50 chance is still very exponentially high. Like that's like
Oh
taking a
yeah.
multiple choice test. I don't know how many multiple choice tests you didn't know the answer to, but you still guessed right.
Hmm.
Like just because you had a 50-50 chance, you got true or false. And thinking about it on a percentage wise. Now, do I think that we're living in a simulated reality? Probably not. This is probably base reality. This is probably the start. But to say that thousands of years down the road, there couldn't be a person like me or you sitting right here in a simulated reality is not that far fetched. It's not that ridiculous, because as technology advances, there's only so far we can go until literally this, what you feel right now, feeling your hands, feeling your skin, you could feel that within a simulation.
Hmm.
You could need to eat, you could need to drink water, and it could just sustain you, like the Matrix essentially. But those concepts are not so ridiculous. It started off as sci-fi, and now it seems more like, okay, potential future. Like it is a very. Am I saying it's going to happen for us? No, probably not. But the idea is we don't know what the future holds. There's infinite possibilities for what could happen. We could all die tomorrow. Like something crazy could happen. Chunk of the sun could just rip apart or something, or the sun could just blow up. We don't know, and that's one of the crazier concepts. Like, yeah, we have our understanding of, like, we have scientists who literally study this all their whole life and can be like, well, no, it's not going to. But no matter what, it's still just a hypothesis. It's what they're working with. They're working with their knowledge that they have.
Hmm.
Everything we know is just based off our knowledge, and to say that we are smarter than the universe in itself is stupid. To say that we're smarter than we are not all knowing. We can't predict. We don't know what could happen. And trying to live your life like that is painful, because if you try to sit there and predict how everything's going to happen, you're going to like, cuz like, if you're right, you're just going to be disappointed. If you're wrong, you're just going to be, well, still kind of disappointed. So it's like you're never
Yeah.
going to be happy.
And that's the thing too, like you said, with all the knowledge that we have, everything we know is based off of what somebody else basically convinced other people to think. So, like for instance, in its base form, we all need water to survive. How do we know that water doesn't slowly kill us? We all need oxygen to survive. How do we know it doesn't take anywhere from 60 to 100 years to finally kill us? You know what I mean? So it's just like we've all been convinced of these things that are just second nature. Like we need air to breathe, we need water to survive, we need sustenance to have energy. These are all things that we know because hundreds of years ago, these are things that people put their heart and soul into, that they convinced other people to believe, and it just became a worldwide known thing. Now, I'm not saying that I don't personally
I would
believe
say,
that water
I'd
eventually
say
kills you.
survival. Yeah, I was gonna say survival needs. Like, I see where you're going with the defining of what's the reason we need it versus the actual need. I do believe actual need is something inherent. Like sustainability is something that's generally we need it. Like, because otherwise you'll just decay. But then there's like a study of this guy who said he hasn't slept in 15 years. I can't remember what his name was. It's some guru.
Yeah, he
He's
just
like, yeah,
meditates. He just
yeah,
meditates a couple hours a day, and that's his sleep supposedly.
yeah, and it's stuff like that, and it's like, because there's still, and that's another concept, is like the need for sleep, and like there's people who die from sleep deprivation, but and a lot of people don't and it's not the idea of no sleep killing them, it's psychological impact and body issues that happen from it, and it's like, there's other things like that. You'll even look back hundreds of years in history. The way we define things were so wrong. You look at even uh, defining the way the planets rotate. It was such a fight to say that, like, we thought the Earth was the center of the universe. The leading astronomers had to set the pace. They had to challenge not just the church, and because, like, as much as I talk good about religion, there was a lot of corruption in the churches, but there's also a lot of people who push for science. But it it's it's like, it's hard to like fully say what, like, who is the bad guy and who is the good guy. But at the end of the day, we were constantly having to challenge perception, and it's like, for whatever reason, that's kind of like, it hasn't fallen off, but as a majority, it kind of has. Like, it doesn't feel like, because every groundbreaking measure that's made now feels like it's more like behind the curtains, instead of like, it's like something like, it's something as revolutionary as finding out, like, oh wow, the earth revolves around the sun, not vice versa, is, it's crazy. Or to find out the shape of the world, or find out how big the planet is. And now it's like the finer details that are being determined. And it's like, who's to say these things still could not be challenged? They're constantly challenging themselves. And that's the thing, like a lot of people, especially if you're listening to this, if you want to go into science, you have to be ready to question everything, but validate what is being told you. And if it makes sense to you, then go with it. But don't ever be afraid to question it,
Yeah.
because just questioning something doesn't mean you're saying it's wrong. It just means maybe you think there's more to it. And that's for whatever reason. I always hate that concept. Like, if you're questioning something, people feel like you're thinking they're wrong. It's like, no, I just think there might be more there. Now, if you're barking up a crazy ass tree where you don't have any substantial evidence or any direct reason to believe it other than, I don't know, uneducated intuition, maybe start trying to get some kind of evidence. Like, that's the thing. If you're going to make an argument, support your argument. And that's a big part of science too. If you're going to make an argument, support it. Because guess what? Whereas it's like with faith, and that's why I say religion and science should be separated. With faith, that's, you don't need to challenge it. It's just believe in your values and hold true to your values, because you know that you're doing the right thing, because you feel like you're doing the right thing. Whereas with science, it's not about the morality of the situation. It's about what is the outcome. And so be willing to challenge an idea if you see holes in it. I mean, look at like some of the greatest minds never stopped pushing to change how we define our understanding of the world, because they were not content with having one answer.
Yeah, and kind of one thing I wanted to dive into, and you talked about it a little bit, as far as people who like educate themselves, and if you're going to make an argument for something, obviously to have it backed up with reasoning. And kind of one thing I think about, and even like personally, I've felt this way, and maybe you have too, as far as just approaching education in school. And I think about the song "School's Out." So it's just like school's out for summer, and then they say school's out forever. There's this notion of once you're done with high school, once you're done with college, you're done learning. You no longer need to learn. You close that part off of your mind. I've learned everything I need to know to get me through life. And I feel like that's where a lot of people go wrong with, um, especially for science. There's a lot of people I talk with that when they're in high school, when they're in college, they didn't like science classes. They didn't like math classes. They didn't like physics. They didn't like those specific areas to touch on. And so how how do people like that even throw themselves into the hat to have a conversation about science, about religion? Because like you said, it's important that religion and science coexist with each other. So how can somebody who is 100% believes in religion and thinks evolution and science is a hoax, or they just don't put the effort and believe in it, how can they put themselves in a debate with somebody who is the exact opposite?
Yeah.
So I
And
think
they
it's
shouldn't. And they
important.
shouldn't. They can
Yeah, they
ask, they can
shouldn't.
talk to them. They can talk to them, but they should never say the words "you're wrong." And
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing about an argument. You should never say, like, and this is where I'm at right now. I'm having an internal debate with myself constantly over, this isn't related to space or science or religion. It's more about age groups. I look at the older generation and I look at the younger generation beneath us. There are things I don't like about both. There are things I don't like about our generation. And like, to understand, it's like they're not wrong. Now, are things like racism wrong? Yes. Are things like inequality wrong? Yes. We need we need equality. We need balance, because everyone has the right. We all have the inherent right to gain the knowledge, to gain respect. We all have that right. You are born with the chance to create something of your existence. Whatever path you choose to take, you are making that path for yourself. But when it comes down to it, there's things like in the younger generation I just don't get. I don't get the trends with TikTok. I don't understand it. I don't understand their lingo. I don't get the new style. I don't get their clothing. I don't understand any of it. Older generation, there's a lot of things I don't get, like their policies, their principles, their old school beliefs, because they don't see how the world is changing. They don't see things like, for example, look at when credit debt was created. Look at when the FICO score was created. It was created very recently. It was not a brand new concept. That's not something the people in the 50s and 60s endured. They endured different financial stress, but I think it was created in the 80s, if I was correct. Let me look it up.
Yeah.
FICO. Sorry, 1 second. I just want to FICO score creation. Oh, it was sorry, 1958. But hold on. No, there was something different. When was credit created? Because I read something about this
Well,
and
that
I'm
was in like the
researching it.
1920s. Was the idea of credit, where you could have something physically in your hands now and pay it back later.
No, credit score. The FICO score was first introduced in 1989 by FICO. They called Fair, Isaac and Company. The FICO model is used by the vast majority of banks and credit grantors and is based on consumer credit files on 3 national credit bureaus. Yeah, but if it wasn't that long ago, that credit score we know existed. FICO didn't exist. The first general purpose FICO score came along in 1989, only 25 years ago. 1958, FICO sent letters to the 50 biggest American credit grantors asking for the opportunity to explain a new concept, credit scoring. So it wasn't firmly, fully established until roughly the 70s, 80s era. Like it was always a concept. The concept of lending and stuff like that has been around,
Mm-hmm.
but credit has become so detrimental to society now that like you can't just go out and buy a house. You can't. You
No,
know what I mean? You can't just buy
that's
a house. If you have
yeah,
bad credit, you can't buy a house.
and that's what's difficult for people our age. Well, I should say most people our age. Um, like for example, like my wife and I, like we plan on obviously buying a house someday, but because she has student debt, I have student debt, we both have debts, we're both young, we don't have long enough of a credit history, it's going to be difficult for us to get a house, get cars, get things at a reasonable level that we can afford. And that's a crazy thing too, is there's the constant push for people our age to go to college, get an education, but it's so difficult to survive after that, because the having debts makes your score go down. If you're debt free, cool, you have a higher score. If you have debts, it makes your score lower, which makes your interest higher, which means you have to pay more. And guess what? While you're paying more for interest for a house or a car you can't afford, you still have student debts that you need to pay off, which are lowering your credit. So it's just a constant snowball effect for most people our age. Obviously, you're in a good spot, or I should say a better spot than most people our age, because you're able to have you enjoy the you
I,
enjoy you
I
enjoy things
operate
most
like a
people
middle,
don't.
yeah, I operate like a middle class fun baby, honestly. Like that's where my life is at right now, but I did things to get there. Like
Yeah, exactly.
it's not like I this came without sacrifice. I had to do things to get to this point. Are there things I could be doing better? Yes, 100%. There are things I could do that could set me up for greater success, but I like the path I'm on right now. Does that mean I don't struggle? Yeah, I struggle. But it's just there are things I see with other groups. Like I have friends who have to worry about feeding families. They have kids, they're not in a good situation. They are struggling every single day. And I have friends on the other side of that who are literally like, "Oh, what's money?" Like, and they're just like, their issues are completely different. But does it mean their issues are any less valid? No. It just means that this is like one of my like, this is a controversial kind of thing I've thought about. Like, do you believe that you should be capped on how rich you can be?
Like it, as far as like, if you
A
go over
financial
this,
cap on yeah, you
like
can
you get
that money gets instantly directed out of your account into helping the community or something like that, or it goes into funding, like it's instantly direct into a secondary account that financially goes back into the country, not by your corrupt government. You get to control where that money goes, you specifically, but you cannot hold on to that money.
no. I know some people do go about that way. Some people are generous. Like there's like that always blows my mind when you see somebody who's worth like Bill Gates. He's worth billions upon billions of dollars. He like once in a while, or people like him who have that ridiculous amount of money, oh, they donated $1 million or $500,000 to this foundation, and people right away, instead of being grateful, they're like, oh, he's got way more money than that, how come he only donated $1 million? Like, what? Like
Yeah.
it blows my mind how people are quick to, like, everybody want, or a lot of people want fame and fortune.
Okay, but to challenge that subject, though, $1 million to a trillionaire is like you giving $1 to charity. To put that in
Exactly.
perspective.
Exactly. And for me, it's all about perspective and uh, things being ratioed out. So obviously, like you said, $1 million to them is like $1 is to me. For me, if I gave $1 to charity, I'd feel good
And
about
that's
it.
a rough estimate. I'm not saying $1 million equates to $1, just so you know. For anyone who wants to argue that, like, I'm not saying, but roughly they have. It's like their excess funds is equivalent to like your pocket change to be able to give. Like that's them. Like, and they also to donate like that helps rich people get tax write-offs and stuff like that. And I'm not saying they don't do it out of altruism. A lot of
Mhm.
these people do. There's a lot of philanthropists who just want to help the world.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing is for all the rich people that are out there, and I don't discourage. Like I aspire to be rich. Everyone should aspire not to be rich, but like to do fundamentally well for themselves. But it's like once you hit this point, it makes me wonder how is that money divided? Like, for example, you look at someone like Jeff Bezos, or you look at someone like Elon Musk. Now, a lot of Elon Musk money probably isn't even fit. Like, it's not tangible. It's probably pumped into companies. His net worth is just so much because of cashing in on those stocks. But realistically, his money's just in the air. It's essentially in a cloud. It's not like anywhere he
Yeah.
can just like pull it out all the time and just lay it out in front of him. It's not like he's like you see Floyd Money Mayweather sitting out here with a duffel bag full of millions of dollars just flexing on people. That's not what he does. Like his money is getting recycled through his companies.
Mhm.
Whereas like that's the challenge right there. And to understand, I think there should be more education to all class systems about other class systems. I think that would be better. I think, and I'm not saying no, people's money should not be taken from them, but I was just wondering how you felt about the cap concept because I do feel like there is such a divide between the lowest class and the highest class. And like to understand that we're looking at world population where there's underdeveloping countries, like who knows what these people could be doing for the world. Not saying everyone has the best interest of the world at heart. There's a lot of people who probably don't. But if we and it's hard to balance that because I do believe we should fix our own country first before we try to save the world. Because
Mhm.
if we can't even hold our own country together, how could we ever help the world?
Yeah.
But getting to the base point, it's like I think class infrastructure and understanding of it is important on all spectrums. I think everyone needs to be educated because there's a lot of hate. There is a lot of hate between the elitist class and the majority, and I understand it. I do. I get where a lot of that hatred comes from, and there's a lot of people who like get to comfortable middle class and they're like, "Oh, what are you complaining about?" Because they forget that some people do try hard. I see people trying hard who just can't catch a break, who are brought down by social stigma, stuff like that, or other issues. But I see on the other side, I see why those people feel the way they do because I also see the other people in that low income class who are useless, who are
Mhm.
they do not do anything to be a functional member of society and they expect a handout. And it's so hard to determine who's worth it and who's not.
Yeah.
And and it makes it a struggle. So I think people need to realize that you can get what you want. You need to work for it though. And it's hard when you see people and there's a bad case of envy in the world. There really is. There's people like and you know me, I didn't grow up rich by any means. Like there are people who have a hatred of people when they are financially successful. I was one of them. I used to be a classist. I used to hate people just inherently for being rich. I did. I had a lot of anger about it. I thought people were getting free passes, and it took me to get to a point, and it didn't happen until recently. Actually, it was something that happened in the army. I got into a fight with one of my buddies actually, and it was an argument. And it was because I was like, you literally had a spoon. You were spoon fed every opportunity that has come your way, and I got so angry about it. I was so mad, and I was like, it finally something just broke in me, and I'm like, why am I lashing out at someone who I consider one of my closest friends over something they didn't choose? They may have been handed those opportunities, but did they take everyone? No. They were walking their own path just the same as I was. We don't choose where we start. We choose where we finish. And that is the biggest belief I've learned to lean into now. Is it always fair where we start? No. There are people struggling every single day, but to give up on yourself and to start playing the blame game will never do anything to help progress society. And the thing a lot of people don't realize is you look at the Robin Hood concept. You steal from the rich, you give to the poor. Now you got the poor of the rich are the poor, and it's a never-ending cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Create the path you want. Don't worry so much about one narrow-minded perspective. Do what you can for yourself. Cherish the moments you can create for yourself, and don't give in to your own hatred.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I've I know that it's a lot of people take kind of a socialist mindset. Think like how you said there's the upper class, middle class, lower class. Everybody wants the upper class, the rich, to take some of their money to help out the lower people, and that's just turning into socialism, where you're taking you're just sandwiching the poor become more middle class, the rich become more middle class, and like that's not the solution either. And there's a lot. It's funny how like people look at a country as like, oh, we're a democracy, we have these freedoms and stuff like that. It's like our country isn't even close to what we identify as. Our country actually identifies as like 6 different things. We're socialist, Republican, democracy. Like there's literally like so many categories that this country falls into, and that, I mean, that's a good thing, and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gives more people more opportunities. We're not all forced to live one certain way, but at the same time, when our country is XYZ different ways of being run, and there's different people who fall into those categories of XYZ that all want the country to be run a certain way, you're never going to have compromise or that middle ground where the country can operate debt free, where people aren't poor, where there aren't starving people, where there aren't people who live off Social Security, things like that. So, like you said, and the country needs to focus on itself before it's going to fix the world. I've seen this recently where literally the USA pumps billions of dollars into countries like Egypt, Israel, Ukraine, Philippines, like all these different countries for foreign affairs into their embassies to try to fund um, things that are wrong in these other countries. And like obviously that's a good thing. The US is trying to be a part of the worldly solution. But we have so many problems in our own country. Like I'm not saying like completely cut ties. Like obviously that's one solution. Completely cut ties with all these other countries. Hey, you're your own country. Fucking deal with your own shit. We have our own starving people and poor people and issues in our own country that we're gonna fund and put programs into. Like that could be a way to fix things in our own country, but also that's going to lead to hurt feelings. And if a World War III happens, or just any kind of butting of heads happens with another country, well, you cut all your ties with our country, you stop funding, we're no longer your ally, we're against you. So that's another way that things could go. So there's so many different ways that the U.S. could focus their efforts on to create solutions. The wrong way could be the right way could be the wrong way, and that's why there's there's never one right way to do things.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of hatred too at the federal level of our country. When a lot of people don't understand the inner workings of politics, they don't realize there are a lot of relief funds directed into helping a lot of the problems that are addressed. It's just, guess what? It's not always your country doing that. It's your state that's not directing those funds properly. Or it could even come down to an individual institute. Say, for example, let's talk about veteran homelessness. The VA gets a certain allotted amount of money overall, right? Gets pumped out. It could be an individual institute's decision on how they direct that funding. They could be fucking over these homeless veterans, not the federal level. It comes down to there's so many inner working pieces that people need to educate themselves about that and realize that, like, maybe do some research. And if, like, say you come up and you look at like what the federal budget is for homeless relief, and you see that the margin there is just so skewed in comparison to something else that you don't think is so beneficial to the country, then yeah, you have a valid argument against the federal government. But if you see it's a good amount, follow the trail. Follow the like bring it down the rabbit hole. See where that money's going. Try to trace it.
Hmm.
See where that money's being ripped apart. See where it's getting broken up and dispersed. I saw firsthand, like, I there's a big argument about our military budget. There's a big argument about it. I don't think it's so much as a bad thing that we have such a high military budget. I think it's actually good, personally, because I don't trust other countries. I trust human nature, but I don't trust other countries because it's not about human nature. It's about politics. Politics kind of spits in the face of human nature sometimes because it brings out the ugliness of humanity. Whereas I don't believe innately that we are that ugly. I believe that we want to help our fellow man. But when you get to the complex understanding of running countries, stuff like that, people turn into despots. People turn into these hierarching like dictatorships, stuff like that, and you get these horrible scenarios. You get genocide, stuff like that. But it starts with understanding. I think if we are going to change our country, it's almost like we got to actually start mass education at the local level. Like even growing up, like learning in like elementary to middle school to high school, how often would we ever actually talk about local politics and what our local leaders represent?
Never.
Never. How often did we even talk about state level and
Never.
understanding our own individual state rights? It was always just a loose understanding of the federal level.
Hmm.
So of course we all build this hatred of the federal level. We all put so much stock in understanding the judicial and the legislative and the executory branches, and it's like why do we think so strongly of this when our government is literally that, like, our states have our own rights. Our states make their own arguments against federal government when they want to.
Hmm.
And so we need to begin to understand there and figure out what's going on within our local communities, then our state, then our country overall. And if you want to complain about what's going on in society, do your part to help it. You can change a life with one action. Now, am I saying go out there and give money to the drug addicted person? I'm not saying they're bad for being drug addicted, but there is a bad drug addiction issue or alcohol addiction in the homeless community. Offer them something outside of that resource. If you want to be a help, if you want to be a change, volunteer at the local homeless shelter. Do something instead of just sitting there and griping about it on Facebook. Because then you can actually see and talk to these people, hear what the people actually need if you want to be part of that change. Don't just sit there and be comfortable, especially because like a lot of the people I see talk about it, and in my personal life, not saying this is the majority, a lot of the people I see bitching about it and complaining about it are doing nothing to change it. They just go tell all their friends on Facebook. Like, you're not changing anything there. They're your friends. They're either all almost like-minded to you, or they're gonna have very light arguments, and they aren't going to challenge you to educate yourself. And whereas you should challenge yourself to educate yourself, understand like, okay, what's the infrastructure here? What is going on in my community? What's the actual homeless, like how many people actually know what the homeless rate is in Wisconsin? You know what I mean?
Nobody
Say you're from
probably.
Wisconsin. Yeah. Who if you want to see change, start by being part of the change.
Hmm.
Petition for the change. And that's all like, and I know we got off the topic of space, but like
No,
that's how
I,
we,
I'm
that's
no,
what
I'm
we
glad.
do.
I'm glad. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah, we started off talking about space. We got into religion, life morals, education, the
Yeah.
military. Like we covered a lot of different topics. And kind of, or one thing I want to touch on as far as you talked about, as far as it all comes back again to education, and whether that's people being open-minded to accepting education, or it's the curriculum and educators that need a change. And I'm kind of finally getting to looking through the window into education from a different perspective now, because my wife's going to be a teacher. So I'm going
They're
to,
underpaid. They
yeah,
are underpaid.
and I get to finally understand where, like, you hear these stereotypes, these stigmas, these ideas, these things thrown around, but I've never been able to educate myself on it. And now, as watching Mandy go through the last couple of years, getting her degree and finally being able to get into it, I'll be able to finally see maybe where these issues are, and maybe be able to express my ideas onto her to help her be a part of the solution. And I know kind of I've just had conversations with her about like just as far as her approach into teaching and stuff like that, and like I love the ideas she has and stuff like that. And that's where, again, it all comes back to is people who want to be educated and want to learn more. When we're young, we're all born as scientists. We What's under a rock? Why is the sky blue? Uh, why does it hurt to walk on rocks? Why does it feel good to walk on grass? We're all scientists trying to figure out the world. We're all born into the world. Everybody's trying to teach us how to talk and walk, and it gets to a certain point in our life where everybody wants us to shut up and sit down. So it's just like it's a matter of not putting that cap on our lives as younger individuals, whether it's grade school, middle school, high school, of the again, and people make a lot of comparisons. I think it was Jalen Smith, Will Smith's son, who made a kind of a bold statement, but again provided a lot of good evidence. If you're going to have a bold statement, provide it with evidence. So how our schools are set up very similar to prisons, where they're structured the same way with how classrooms are, the hallways are. Um, there's a bell in prison that tells you can go outside. There's a bell that tells you you have to come back inside, just like school. There's certain ways you have to dress in certain schools. You have to walk a certain way, act a certain way. So it's like it's when I first heard him say that, it's like, okay, prisons are not like schools. Like, what the hell is he talking about? And he brought up all these points that, again, it all comes down to the way kids are forced to learn, and it's even
See, and I
coming
feel
down.
like I feel like I challenge that argument. Just I understand like the commonalities he's making, but when you like the prison system, I can't draw that comparison mentally, even with what that you're providing with what he said. For one, simply because the choice is ultimately there, whereas prison, like yeah, you made a choice to be there, but it was one detrimental decision, and now you're going into it with a different mindset. You're not you get the choice to educate yourself if you want to be there, or you can go down a darker path. And I guess like when I think about school systems, like this is my theory that I'd like to propose or topic on that concept. Like, and it kind of ties into the multiverse concept. Imagine a universe where like being a third grade teacher is like being like, I don't know, Michael Jackson, just being like the on top of the world. Like, what if why are we pumping millions into celebrities instead of into our education? Why shouldn't you have to have the highest, most prestigious education to teach the youth of tomorrow? Why are you not, and I'm not saying educators are dumb by any means, but why is it not like why is it not like when someone's like, yeah, I'm a teacher, everyone's like, whoa, you're a teacher? Like you teach people? Like instead of like everyone's like, yeah, I'm an actor. Everyone's like, oh, you're an actor? You pretend to be people? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's, and that's like where my principle about that lies. It's like, and like I feel the same way about sports and stuff like that. And I know where the counter argument is there. Well, it generates revenue. It's entertaining. It saves people's lives. It because people tie their faith into these things, and it has a mass appeal. It's like if we could just do that with education, if we can make education that thing. And why does it feel so hard to want to be educated? This is from personal experience too. Why are we so argumentative about learning more? And if you notice throughout time, things you're told in elementary school change drastically by the time you're in high school. The things you're hearing like in elementary school, and I don't know if it's going from a small town perspective to high school in a bigger area, but going from like, yeah, Columbus is this guy to now everyone's like, fuck Columbus. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like the deeper understanding you get, people get so angry at history. And it's like we learn history to not repeat ourselves. And the fact is, and this is a kind of a controversial statement, without what happened in America, America would not be where it's at today to be able to become a better nation. And I know there's a lot of hatred about the past. But if we don't let go of the past, if we don't move forward, if we don't fight for a better future, we're never going to see one. It's just going to be hatred regurgitating hatred.
Mhm.
And that's why I think teachers should be like the new rock star. I think teachers should be looked at as this like This major, same with civil service, things like law enforcement, stuff like that. Things that are key components in our community. If you could respect the positions that these people fill and understand, if you could put yourself in their shoes for a day, because I would never want to be a teacher. I think it's fucking hard, and a lot of people lose their passion about teaching because of what happens within the education system.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing too. Like you said, I agree that these very important roles and occupations that we all see, they all deserve more respect. And like you said, there's people like rock stars, there's people like actors. It's like, whoa, you're on TV, you're a rock star, you do this, you do that, or you're a doctor. It's like, why you it, a doctor gets more, a lot of times gets more respect because you have to go to school for a minimum of 4 years to become a doctor. You can become a teacher with an associate's degree, like at its lowest form. I think you could be like a substitute teacher. You could just like be a substitute within a 2-year associate's degree. Or you want to be a police officer, you could go through a program in what, 4 to 6 months to become a police officer. um, Same thing with firemen, same thing with uh I'm just trying to think of like very important roles in society.
EMS, EMT
Yeah,
crews, paramedics,
they
like
they can all go through programs in 2 years or less to do something that people take for granted because they look at it as, oh, you only went you went to school for 4 to 6 months and became something. Well, that guy went for 4 or 6 or 8 years, so he's higher in the totem pole than you. And I think it's the exact opposite. And I'm not saying that like um
well, and it's
police
experience
officer,
versus education.
yeah, and I'm not saying that like teachers, police officers, things like that, they need to go to school for 8 years to get their recognition like doctors and stuff do. It's quite the opposite. It's just weird how there's that double standard where education equals respect, and
Well,
that's where it
and
falls off in a lot of areas.
well, here, and I can use this. I can even talk about this from a military standpoint, because like I like to look at the military like a smaller, condensed version of our world, right? So when we get a new lieutenant, right, fresh out of college, everyone has to respect the rank, but barely anyone ever respects the person, especially if they're fresh out of college. They're like, who the fuck is this guy or girl? Like, who the fuck are they to come in here and now they're in charge of me? But yet, as that person progresses in their rank, they get more experience under their belt. A lot more respect is shown to that person. Even though that person has a 4-year degree, education doesn't always merit respect. It's about knowing what you're doing, and it's about actually like it's taking principle and putting it into practice. If you can show that what you know actually is worth the practice and you're good at what you're doing, and it's like almost like a lot of people lose that in the translation of learning. They forget, like, yeah, they now have everything that looks good on paper. Now it's time to show that you're good at it, and it's time to like gain that experience and earn your trust within your community. And that's why I think like the education system is flawed, because it's like they're not, for one, it's so hard, and I don't understand where this like is. Like I said, even I experienced it. I struggled with wanting to sit there, and it wasn't because I felt like I didn't want to learn. I was learning a lot on my own time. I used to spend all the time in the library. I used to sit in the Coleman Library all the fucking time and just read books. I love to learn. I just did not like being in a classroom, and I couldn't piece it together. And maybe it's just because the passion of the teacher wasn't there for me, or maybe I just didn't like the teaching method. And it's like it's so hard to discern how to teach people. But if we could actually be like, no, this teacher right here, this teacher's a fucking rock star, and they have the education to be that rock star teacher, it might change the perspective of the youth, and we might educate these better and get them excited about education.
Hmm.
Because now it's like so many people dream of being rappers, actors, sports players, and it's like that's cool, but it's also very, very limited field of scope to get into. And obviously people are like, well, it's the quickest way to millions. And it's like, that shouldn't be your mindset.
Yeah.
Always. It shouldn't. And that's why it's like, man, I personally believe there should be pay cuts. And that's a big argument out there, I'm sure. But like, for one, a lot of these rich people get all this money and they just throw it away right away anyways. So it's like, why not Why do they have to make millions if they're passionate about what they do? That's my challenging question for it. It's like, why does, and this is not to call out any particular player, it's just the first name that pops in my mind. Like either like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, why do any of these people have to make as much money as they do? Or even looking into the NBA or looking at actors like or influencers, like people like Logan Paul, Jake Paul, any of those kind of people. Why do they get the right to make as much money as they do when what they are doing for society isn't really super impactful?
Yeah, and that and
Entertainment is important, but
one comparison to make too, which always blows my mind, is like you say, these professional athletes, actors, influencers who make millions upon millions of dollars yearly, and the president of our United States, who makes some of the toughest decisions, and God knows what they do behind closed doors to keep our country from turning into a dumpster fire, makes a respectable like 400,000 a year.
you know the crazy thing is? People fucking hate how much Congress makes. People hate how much politicians make, but yet you don't hear them ever complain about these athletes. They're like, well, they throw a ball good.
Yeah,
Do you know that those people literally control your political life? They
yeah.
sit there and they fight for your rights every single day, but yet you care more about the guy who's athletic and catch a ball. Like, how are you going to make one argument but not listen to the other side of it? Like,
Well,
how
then,
can you hate your like? Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, and that's a big thing too, and that's all it is. It's a distraction. It's entertainment, and that's why, as much as I enjoy sports, that's what it is for me. A lot of times, it's a distraction. I can sit down for 2, 3, 4 hours, however long this game is, and forget about all the other problems of the world. And that's what it is for a lot of people. It gives them something to look forward to. It gives them a release. It gives them a couple hours a day for once a week, or if they're into multiple sports, a couple times a week, to just sit down and forget about the world. And that's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because like you said, it generates revenue. So that's the biggest argument, that why these people make millions of dollars to throw a
It's good for the
football.
economy.
Yeah, it's because they generate they generate this much money. So cool, your team does really well, your team gets a lot of good TV time, your team gets a lot of good ratings, you sell a lot of jerseys, you sell a lot of memorabilia, so this is how much money you're worth. And that's fine, that's a good argument to make. But at the same time, like you said, there's so much hate for politicians, and I mean, obviously, I'm one of those people, but for a different reason. I don't dislike politicians because I think they make too much money. I dislike politicians because I think they're putting their efforts in the wrong areas, and are, in some cases, abusing their power and not using their power where they need to make change happen. So, in some cases, I think some politicians don't make enough money. Um, and I'm going to rephrase that and say the ones who actually provoke change and induce change, and they did this and this good thing came out of it, those
Challenge
people
question for that though.
deserve more money.
How do you define who's making change? Because that's another problem with being so politically divided. Our country sees change as positive on one end of the scope and not negative on the other. And it's like it's constantly a tug of war within our political structure. And it's so difficult to pinpoint like when honestly the base value things we should fight for are the things that we should have first, like the things that we all know that we are against. Homelessness. No one wants to see people in the streets dying. That I think every side of politics can agree with that. I don't think there's a person who's pro homelessness. The drug issue. I don't think there's anyone who's pro drug issue. Now, how we go about handling the drug situation is where it gets a little bit controversial.
Hmm.
Now, tackling human rights is a very difficult one too, because defining what a right is very hard. And when you look at our Bill of Rights, which was actually, interestingly enough, established by anti-federalists because they didn't want the federal government to have too much power, so that was put in place for us, the people, to preserve our rights as individuals. It's hard to define an individual's right because and it's funny because a lot of people think it's religion arguing against the human's basic rights, but actually in a lot of ways it's science. And like there's a topic I don't want to bridge into because it gets controversial. I'll just say the topic, but we're not going to talk about it. One of those bigger issues right now that is constantly on the fringe of a major argument is transgenders. It's the concept of transgenderism. And another concept is pro-life, pro-choice. Those two concepts are very big arguments in society right now. Now, do I hate anyone who's transgendered? No. Do I disagree or agree with it? I won't say it, because I don't have to tell someone what my beliefs are for me to respect their choices, but I will abide by what my country determines as right, because I am an American citizen. And I know people are like, well, the argument to that is like, oh, look at World War II, look at what Hitler did. His people just said they were just following what their country said was right. It's like it's not the same thing. When it comes down to it, if there's science behind something, because I'm a big listener to science, but I also do challenge science. Like I just said earlier, challenge science. But if you're looking at something that is detrimental to a person's livelihood, or you see an exploitation of a system or an abuse of a system, that's not acceptable. It's not. And like, when you fight for equality, sometimes you're limiting someone else's equality, which is another hard balancing act. And it's one of those things that we got to get to a point where it's like, all right, we need to find a compromise here. But when does that line get drawn too is then a big question as well. When does the line get drawn? When is equality met? And now there's just a push for a lopsided balance or imbalance. Like, and it's such a hard question to answer, because what is equality, you know?
Yeah.
Because true base form equality is like almost everyone who screams communism is right. But a lot of people don't understand what communism is, and or even like socialism at a lighter note. If you want to look at, like, I just look at socialism as like, it's not communism, but it's definitely, it's iffy. And a lot of people, like, the biggest thing with socialism that's a big argument is like the healthcare structure. And it's like, you do realize that people still got to wait for months to get in to see a doctor unless they pay for premium healthcare. That's the funniest thing that people don't understand about socialist healthcare, is that it's pretty much similar to ours. It's just what kills us is our insurance companies. But we're not going to get into that either.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I was just gonna make a point about that too, because I've seen a lot of people like saying like, oh, look at these countries like Canada has universal health care. I think like Switzerland maybe. I know some European countries have it. Not a ton have it, but there's always the argument that why don't we have universal health care? And I was just gonna bring up again, like just like you said, that yes, universal health care exists, but I think it was somebody from Canada who's talking that unless you have the money to pay, like you have to be wealthy to have a family doctor, to have somebody that something's wrong, this is the person you go to. Otherwise, if you have a terminally ill condition, it might be months before you can get in to get it checked out. Like that's how the universal health system works. Like you said, it's a long waiting line. Nobody just can get in. So obviously there's, like you said, there's a lot of things wrong with our healthcare system due to our insurance companies, that they're super high deductibles to make things affordable, but then you got to meet those deductibles unless you want something to happen, and even then you're still stuck paying 70-80% of whatever your bill might be. So
Exactly. It's like that needs to be reined back in. People keep blaming the doctors. It's not just the doctors, it's corporations. Corporations have gotten out of hand. And whereas capitalism is great for, like, that's a double-edged sword. Private business is good. It's the reason why you can become a millionaire tomorrow if you wanted to. If you had the right idea, the right motive, the right timing, and just the right amount of luck, you could be a millionaire tomorrow, because of meeting a need or a desire in society at the right time. And that is the beautiful thing about capitalism. But the more that happens, the harder it is to balance the country. And it's like, no one understands that, or well, I won't say no one understands. A lot of people probably do understand this, but that the more that we preach about the land of opportunity, the less opportunity that exists. We are no longer the land of opportunity, and we need to rebrand America. And I think that's where it starts. We got to stop being like freedom country number one, land of equality, opportunity. We got to stop selling ourselves on such a high note because we set such a high standard as a country. No country's perfect. And there's a lot of countries that their people don't like what's going on within them right now. And like you'll see people come from other countries and they love everything about America because as much as we complain about a lot of the stuff in our society, there's a lot of good things too. And I think that's a bigger issue there too is people see the bad and they struggle to see the good. And this is the only thing I'm going to say. Raising, like, this is one thing that I know is a thing that gets said a lot. Raising the minimum wage gap's not going to do anything. So if you're out there and you truly believe that, I'm sorry, it's not. Do I think people deserve better pay? Yeah, if they get better education. Do I think education should be more accessible? Yes. I do believe that. Do I think free education? Not necessarily. I don't think it should be as expensive as it is. And if you notice how much education has increased in inflation in terms of being able to go to college and stuff like that, I don't think that's acceptable. But also, it's a counterbalance act. The more degrees that exist in the world, the less valuable they are. No matter what, ultimately, we're going to fuck our system. We're hitting a point where the population is so big, it's fucking our system. It's not always just the government's fault. It's the amount of people that exist.
Yeah.
We just need Thanos to do the snap. That's all we need.
And like you said, I'm glad you brought it up because it made me think of, like you said, the more degrees that exist in the world, the less valuable they are, and we're already seeing that to the point. And talking with my sister, for example, she got a degree in like business marketing, and like for us, for our generation, anybody from really probably the late 80s to early 2000s, there's such a huge push for education, and now it's getting to the point where not having a degree is enough. You come out of college with a bachelor's degree, guess what, that job that you had in mind with that you want to get with that degree, guess what, you need 3 to 5 years of experience before you can step into that role. So it's like it's getting to that point where just having a degree isn't enough, you now need experience. So it's a matter of, we're in this upward trend of, you need a degree, okay, now you need experience. Is it going to get to the point where you need more experience? They need to find a way to flatten that curve, if not make it come back down, where people with, like, for example, myself, the only thing I really have to my name is a high school degree. I have 2.5 years of college. I've learned a lot, or I've grasped a lot of knowledge, but that doesn't go onto paper because I don't have a degree to show for it. So it's a matter of finding those people who have technical diplomas, associate degrees, some people who just have college experience but never finish, getting them not equal. I would never say that they're equal to people who have finished or people who have those degrees, but close that gap to where um, people who have, again, 2-year degrees, technical degrees, just getting licensed and stuff, they're basically equated to people who are at a high school education, and they're not, because
No, they're not.
they're a step up from that, and but they're also a level below people who have finished. So it's a matter of getting people, again, like myself, I'm in this pool so I can talk about it and not feel like I'm stepping on toes. Like, people like myself need more opportunities to get to do better than the opportunities that they're given. Um, and
Well, and
that should be a thing
yeah.
all around, and that not even just specifically for education, but just anybody. There just needs to be the only spot that the gap doesn't need to shouldn't be lessened is like the lower class, middle class, upper class, because that's becoming socialism. But like education, I'm just trying to think of another example. There's a lot of things where there's such a big gap in between things. That gap needs to be lessened in order to see progress.
So I'd put it like this. I think capitalism works. I'll just say this: capitalism needs to see a decline in how, because like our capitalism is starting to look more like, picture, instead of like, you know how it used to be like a smaller triangle, like say about that big for the rich and elite, and then you'd say like the middle is like about like that, like, and then you have the lower income, which is like about that. You're seeing an expansion of like low income is like about that now. The middle class is like that, and then you have a little bit more on the top for rich people now, like so something about like that. That's where the problem is starting to be seen in society, because even the middle class has got stretched so thin. Low income is to be defined as low income, which is funny. A lot of people who think they're low income or in poverty by global standards are actually not, which is actually really entertaining. It's like there are people who live on a wage of like $2.50 an hour in other countries, and that's what they live on. And does that mean that they have
But also they
less
have less
resources, bro?
inflation. They just have less
Yeah,
inflation too, though. Like that
yeah.
250, it's like, whoa, they're only making that much money. It's like, yeah, they live off that because that's what their country is set up for them to live off of, and they can get sustenance and live comfortably off of that.
Well, see, that's still their poverty level, so I wouldn't say they live comfortably, but they still, it's a different standard.
Yeah.
So what the problem here is, let's say we got to focus mainly on America, and I think that's the biggest thing. Is like that's my only big problem. Like one of my not one of my only problems, but and I won't like define it by political parties, but the push to be an external asset to other countries, like I don't know. Sometimes there's a belief I have, like, what if we just closed our borders for a while? Like, not to say that, like, I understand we are a place of freedom for a lot of people who seek it, but sometimes, just like we can't control that we're born in America, other people cannot choose the country that they're born in. Am I saying it's fair what they live with? No, I do not agree with that. But as our country is continuing to expand, the more population increase. Another big thing is a lot more people need to get interested in trade work again. Me personally, I just can't fucking do it. I don't even know when to twist left or right sometimes with a wrench. So I'm out of the running for that. But if you're mechanically inclined or you're just really good with your hands, pursue it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let them tell you have to go to college. Trade work is good money right now because there's a deficit in employment because, like you said, us late 80s to early 2000 babies now have all been told to pursue our education, go to college, and a lot of parents who did work trade jobs want to see their kids to go to college because they didn't want their kids working in trade work. But what they don't understand is when you tell a majority to not pursue trade work, we lose out on a very important part of society, and it shouldn't be depreciated, the value of the work that person does. It's like I don't look at the person who works at McDonald's any less than, say, a, a I don't know, we'll say a nuclear physicist. I don't look at them different. They just are doing a different role in society. Now, do I think you should be working at McDonald's after 20 plus years if I see more merit in you and more education in you than that? No, because you're wasting your abilities.
Hmm.
You're choosing to stall yourself out. Now, if I look at you and I see you working at McDonald's after 20 plus years and there's no light on in there, well, then I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a fit for you. Like, this is your happy place. This is all you're capable of. And that's okay. It doesn't make you less. You are providing some form of service. You're actually doing something. And you are working your ass off to sustain yourself, even though, because we're all born with the same rights, but we're not all born equal. And that's a harsh thing to say. Like, we're all born with the same equal opportunities within this country, but ultimately, there are people who are born and they just don't develop educationally the same,
Hmm.
or they just don't have that internal drive, or were never taught that. And sometimes they just don't want to learn that. So if you want to be content with where you're at, but like, we don't realize what we're doing to our own country. Like, we keep pointing fingers at our political figures, but we always forget that we're the ones who control it. We're always talking about this invisible puppet master running our country, this overarching thing. It's like, do you think those politicians that you're complaining about making that much money, you think they want to see their job go away? Do you think they want to see the country stop running? Hell no. That means no money for them, right? That's just a stupid argument. No, they want to see us sustain. They want, like, they may want it, like, they may not have the most ethical views, and they may be doing things that are detrimental to the country, but they think that they're right because they're trying to keep the country going. It's about realizing the power you have as an individual, and I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They forget. They want to bark, but they don't want to bite. They want to have the argument for the argument's sake without understanding the argument. They want to fight for something without even knowing what they're fighting for. They want to continue to say shit for 20 plus years, ultimately never making a dent in anything but their Facebook page because they don't actually care. when you care about something, it's like, say I care about, I don't know, say I want to be, and I'll use it in like layman's terms, like say I want to be able to bench press 350 pounds or something like that, or say I want to be able to say my ABCs backwards. I'm not just going to bitch about it on Facebook and be like, well, this guy over here is benching 500, but he's cheating. He uses steroids. Or I'm like, well, this person's just inherently a genius. It's not fair. They can say their ABCs backwards. They've been able to do it since they were 6. Why worry about what they're doing? Do the things you can do.
Mhm.
Change what you can. Then, when you have changed everything you can, have done the impact you've wanted to see, now you have somewhat of a voice. Because I believe, yes, we have freedom of speech, but you also have the underlying knowledge to know that if you're going to open your mouth, be selective with what you're saying, for one, and be calculated and know what you're talking about. And that's why I use very loose terms. There's certain things we've bridged the gap of right here, right now, that I refuse to go further into the details because I don't know about it, and I
Mhm.
have no right to talk about it. I can't. And even if it's like, I'll bring it back up one subject, transgenderism. I don't know what a transgender person's feeling. I don't know what goes on in their brain. They could be suffering. They could be living hell on walking earth. Like, from what I've read in the articles I've seen about something, like, imagine waking up every single day not feeling all right. Like, imagine having an itch on your body you just can't scratch every single day of your life. That's enough to drive anyone crazy. Dude, I try to refrain from itching my neck sometimes, just, or like wherever I'm itchy. I go ballistic, dude, just trying to hold off on that. So if that's how someone mentally feels, am I saying they're right? No. But am I saying what they're feeling is awful? Yes, it is. And I'm not saying what they're right. When I say what they're feeling is right, no, I'm also not saying I'm against it. I just don't want to bridge that topic.
Yeah.
But the
Well, that's the
idea
thing
is
is
this.
we're both smart individuals. We know, like, we're we we talk about what we know about or have a general understanding of, and then we leave the other topics for people who know about it or people who write articles about it. Like, if like certain topics, like we briefly touch on politics, we briefly touch on religion, because everybody should have a general understanding of religion and politics. Like,
And
that
exactly as
it's just a
go ahead.
general conversation, but to force opinions, to force ideas on people who don't know what you're talking about. And that's the thing too, that I always get, that's frustrating, is if you know super well about a very specific topic and you talk to somebody about it, if they don't agree with you, they're not saying you're wrong. They're just saying they don't understand. You literally said the the words you said to them were the first time they heard those words in their life 10 seconds ago. How can you expect them to, yep, got it, you're right? You know what I mean? You're the first person they've
Yeah.
ever heard that from. So, like, and, and that's where a lot of these arguments and misunderstandings happen in the world, is because there's people who have general understandings or no understanding having a conversation with experts in topics, and it's either the people who are stubborn and think they know everything at the bottom, or the people who are stubborn and think they know everything at the top, that are the problem, because they're misconceiving the other side. They see them as, oh, you know everything, you're talking down to me, or they see the people who have a general understanding as, you know nothing, I'm the expert here, shut your mouth and listen. And that's where the problem comes with those kind of
and
conversations.
and it 100% does. And I was actually just going to add on to that. I was going to say, when you're talking to someone and you know about something, or you think you know about something, the first words out of your mouth, if they say something you disagree with, should not be "you're wrong." The first words out of your mouth should be, "Well, why do you think like that? I'm curious. Like, educate me. What is your perspective?" Because it shouldn't be, because like the second you say you're wrong, you have already dismissed anything that person has to say to you. You have already, like, you could be like, Michael, the sky is green like grass and the grass is blue like the ocean. Completely abstract concept. Then I'd be like, well, Collin, why do you feel like that? Oh, well, because I have color dysmorphia. My eyes perceive things the wrong way. Holy
Yeah.
shit. There's an alleviation. Like, there is a new understanding in my brain. Like, that's why he sees it like that. It's not because he's wrong. It's because that's his perception of the world. because he doesn't perceive things like I do, because that's what he comes from. Now, it would be on me to explain the majority, be like, oh, well, because you have that, I'll actually tell you what the colors look like from my perspective. The grass is green, the sky is blue. And it comes down to that. And now if the person on the other end of that who may have this thing that deters them has an option now, they could be like, oh, well, I'm still probably always going to see the world like this. But knowing that you see the grass is green and the sky is blue is okay, because it doesn't deter me, because the grass feels the same and the sky looks like the sky just functions the same exact way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't deter the function of the sky just because what you see it as is different. And the big issue right now in society, everyone wants to dismiss people because they think they're right, and people are too afraid to speak up because they are faced with intelligence. And like I just said, you should educate yourself on the things you talk about, but if you genuinely want to know more, ask somebody that of their perspective. Do I say follow everyone blindly as fact? No, because previously we already mentioned challenge. It's okay to challenge concepts. I could even be like, oh, well, what's the study behind that visual issue you have? And like, if you have some knowledge about it, I'd love to hear about it and just understand, like, oh, well, is there any correction for it? Because like, it's like, I would love for you to be able to see the world as I see it, but not saying the way you see the world is wrong, but maybe like it would just be interesting for you to see the world as I see it. Just like I would try to understand the way you see the world. It's not saying you're wrong. It's just understanding the differences and learning more about it and being like, well, have you ever tried to correct it so you can see like the majority? So you can understand the majority perspective? And if you are content with just accepting the world as a green sky and blue grass, it still doesn't hurt anybody. Now, only when your opinions get to the point where it hurts people, where it's like, well, no, fire doesn't burn people. Well, okay, well, we're gonna have a conversation about that. And it's explaining why fire hurts people. And if you're just not receptive of that, then it comes down to the core fight right there, because now what you're doing actually hurts people. Can't be an arsonist, Collin. I'm sorry.
And I'm glad you bring that up too. And I was thinking of like from a kid's perspective, how um fire bad, like fire's bad, and you know what? Eventually they're gonna be like, okay, why is the fire bad? And then they get burned. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's bound to happen. It's bound to happen eventually, and it's as much as you want to prevent it. Like nobody wants to see somebody get hurt. Nobody wants to see somebody get burned. But guess what? It happens to everybody eventually because they don't know.
I've never
Their
met a kid.
curiosity eventually gets to them to the point that they have to do it, and they're like, "Oh, that's why."
I've never met a kid who has not been burned by a sparkler.
Or anything.
Exactly, but I always use the sparkler concept because it's an entertaining tool. Because it's like, oh, pretty, shiny, sparkly. It's like shooting off sparks. Even the mildest burn. I remember I had a burn on my hand because sometimes the way we learned is by getting burned. Unfortunately, knowledge cannot equate for everything. That's where wisdom comes in. Wisdom through prior experiences. So whereas like, don't listen to everything knowledge based all the time. If it's like, if someone tells you that a sparkler can only be one color, don't always listen to that. It's not necessarily, it's a misinformation. Do the research for yourself and be like, oh no, there's a color variety pack right here. But listen to the person with the wisdom to tell you all sparklers will burn you, unless you don't feel pain, but it will still hurt your body even though you don't feel the pain, because they know, because they've experienced the burn. Wisdom should have more importance in society, and I feel like a lot of people don't want to hear wisdom more than they want to. Everyone wants to fact check everything. No one wants to wisdom check anything. It's like, well, to do this could be an intellectual decision, but what is the wisdom behind it? To understand, that's why I love history so much, because history is chock full of wisdom. And dude, growing up in high school, so many kids hated history class. So many people were bored out by history, and it's like, well, they're all old dead people, blah 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 blah. It's like, do you understand the importance of understanding what's behind you? Do you know if a lot of those people knew history, they wouldn't have repeated it? Because
Yeah.
guess what? Mistakes are made by history, and the wisdom is to learn from those mistakes and better ourselves as people. Are we going to keep making mistakes? Oh, fuck yeah, we're human. We're not perfect. We're never going to be a perfect specimen, no matter what we change genealogy, like genetically. no matter what we change, like say we create the perfect human being genetically, like your brain functioned at a certain level, you have like everyone has this top-notch IQ, everyone's super like perceptive of everything. It doesn't change the fact that you're going to go from one stage to another where you're probably going to get burned at some point. Wisdom will speak volumes for you. And it's like balancing your understanding of emotional intelligence, knowledge based intelligence, so like book smart, stuff like that. Your street smarts, where it's just like understanding the world around you and like going with your gut feeling and intuition. And then wisdom, which is learning from prior failures of either a ignorant situation or not having the know-how to survive a situation, or not say survive but endure a situation, and now learning from that and having made those mistakes, don't repeat your mistakes. Like, and it's like all, if you can find the perfect balance of that without narrowing your perception of the world around you, it'd be a lot better path for everybody.
Yeah. It's funny, I have the timer going. I don't know if you realize. Well, it's probably
Holy
backwards for you.
fuck.
Yeah, 2 hours, 19 minutes we've been going.
Oh my god, dude. Well, this might be 2 episodes.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
I'm,
the 50th episode, so
yeah, I might have to break this into 2 or 3 episodes actually.
yeah, be
Well, I
like,
should say have to, but I mean we this is our 50th episode, but like we've done, like, looking at our analytics of our episode, not a single person has ever watched our video from second one to end ever. People
yeah,
watch bits and pieces of it. Like the average is like 5 to 10 minutes of episodes people will watch, and they probably skip around and just like look for talking points that we talk about, which is fine. I do the same thing with other people's videos. If I see a 2 or 3 hour video, guess what? I'm gonna click on certain points that I want to watch or learn about or whatever it might be. Um, so obviously breaking this episode into smaller episodes, it gives people the opportunity to, oh, they're talking about this, cool, I'll listen to them talk to for 20-30 minutes about that. So this was a good episode. I know we kind of went in with saying like, oh, we'll talk about space, and we talked about like 15 different things, and it's awesome. And obviously if we get feedback on certain things that people are like, oh, you guys should talk more about this, cool, we'll talk about it. But I don't know,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a
Just
good
like
point to stop. I don't know.
oh yeah,
You want?
perfect place. No,
Yeah.
it's a perfect place to wrap up. So with that, I'd like to just say anyone who tunes in, thank you as always, and continue to like, subscribe. Yeah, and I do recommend maybe break a lot of this up, like pull your favorite little segments out, like you usually do for like your TikTok and stuff like that. And I think it'll be easier for just because everyone's attention span is so short these days.
Hmm.
Uh, but keep that in the recording. Yes, I hate all of you. Fuck all you people. No, but yeah, no. Overall, that was a great episode, man. I loved every second of it. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, you have
all right,
yourself a good one, sir. I'll
I'll
see
hop
you.
on Xbox for a bit because I'm doing my schoolwork later because I have some girl coming over to help me study. So, yeah, hopefully that
Study.
goes well. No,
Study.
hopefully I'm. She's probably thinking dick appointment. Oh, we're still recording. Well, either way. So no, but I'm thinking I actually want someone to like study with because I actually like having company when I do my schoolwork because it keeps me focused. Because I can be like, stay away. I gotta learn.
Yeah.
But with that, I've been holding it since the beginning for the bathroom. So
All right. Have a good one,
signing
man.
off. Yeah, I'll hop on Xbox here in a second.
All right. See ya.